Very, very warm welcome to another live Action for Happiness event. My name is Mark Williamson, and it's such a joy to be with you again in this amazing global community. And I'm particularly both excited about and potentially in need of this evening's theme or today's theme about rest and how to restore ourselves. And I'm really delighted to be welcoming Octavia Raheem here with us today. Octavia, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
I'm loving the response we've already had to this theme, and also the conversation you and I have had in preparation for this, because it feels such an important topic, this idea of almost giving ourselves permission to rest when life feels so busy. So much I'd love to ask you about, and of course later on, everyone, you'll have a chance to ask Octavia your own questions. And as always, we're going to have a few interactive things along the way. Please do use the chat, as I see you already are. Great to see people welcoming each other from all around the world. But let's keep it kind, let's keep it relevant, let's keep it supportive, as always. And let's start, Octavia, with a little bit about you. Obviously, your specialism is in this theme of rest and restore, as a rest coach and a yoga teacher, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to this topic and why it means so much to you.
I can do that. I want to actually start by stopping, Mark, and invite people to, if you were about to type something in the chat, pause. If you're mid-movement, pause. Notice your body, pay attention to your body, and then notice your breath. And I want to open the space by us tuning into our individual and collective breath, just 3 breaths. So what are we doing right now? Bearing witness, right? Experiencing our breath, pausing long enough to be satisfied with the breath. Take 3 breaths this way. And then let your next breath be the fullest breath you've taken this week. But let the fullness come by way of ease. You don't have to belabor the breath to make it full. And then exhale everything out. So my name is Octavia Raheem. I am the rest coach and restorative guide for visionary leaders and forward-thinking companies and organizations who want to create a legacy through their work that's sustainable, equitable, empowered, and expansive. And I'm also the author of 2 transformational books that were written from a well-rested place. The first one is Gather, and the first one is Pause, Rest, and Be. I came to rest, kicking and screaming. I came to rest through a near-death experience that left me in the hospital dehydrated, completely fatigued, mentally overwhelmed, and emotionally depleted, and clearly spiritually disconnected. The condition is called rhabdomyolysis. The details of that don't matter so much, but what I want to share with you here today at the onset is that I came to rest from working myself to bone deep exhaustion. And it was in a hospital bed and with a really benevolent nurse who said to me while I was hospitalized, like, what are you doing? How'd you get this condition? You're too young and you're too healthy to have this condition that ultra marathon runners get. And then she said to me, how is it that you're living your everyday life like an ultra marathon runner? And what that everyday life looked like was waking up at 4 a.m. and going to bed at midnight and doing a colossal of things, including work, family life, working out, all the things, barely eating, barely nourishing myself in that 20 hours that I would just constantly be on. And so I came to rest as a last ditch effort, right? To save my own life. And because I had to, like, rest drug me to the altar to lay down. And what really awakened for me while I was unwell and in the hospital is this nurse who said to me, "You are running. You are running from your life. You think you're busy. You think you're doing all of this to get ahead, but it seems to me like you are trying to outrun something." And who and what I was trying to outrun turned out to be myself, right? And and she offered me these words, Psalms 46:10, that say, "Be still and know." She said, "Can you trust that?" And in the moment, I was like, absolutely not. I don't trust stillness. I trust movement. How do I get ahead without moving? And I have walked with those words. It's been about 13 years now, maybe more. I've walked with those words of be still and know. What wisdom can I access in the still point? What can I hear beyond and besides the noise for so long? And this is where my passion, my intentionality, my relentlessness that we must all rest comes from. It comes from having to rest, knowing that um, rest is what saved me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really moving to hear your personal journey with this. I feel a desire to connect with the whole community here. I love that pause you took us through, and I felt that calm me down inside as well. Almost have a nervous energy hosting these events. There's a question I'd love, I think you can word it better than I can, but it'd be nice to ask our community something about their relationship with rest. What's the right sort of question we could be asking everyone about what they need rest-wise?
Yeah. So I'd like to ask you and everyone else to pause again, pause a lot throughout this conversation, right? And to just maybe place your hand on your heart, someplace on your body, and just silently ask yourself, what part of me is most in need of rest? What part of me is most in need of rest? And really listen for the answer without judgment. And if you'd like to share the part in the chat, please do, right? And as you're sharing the part in the chat, or as you're feeling into the part that raises his hand and says, "It's me, I need rest, please."
So I'm just going to read a few of the things out that are flying past. My heart, my mind, my body, my shoulder, a lot of my worrying mind, my brain. Um, I found myself saying heart to my surprise, actually. I thought it would be my brain, but actually, I'm not even quite sure what I mean by that, Octavia. It feels like it's a mixture of the sort of cardiovascular system and the fact that I'm busy, but also like my emotional heart and giving that a bit of a rest as well. And I'm seeing my knees, my head, my eyelids, everything, the nervous system, spine. Wow, it's quite a list.
It is a list. So I invite folks, and including you, to just imagine that you can lay that part down in this conversation in some way. That part doesn't have to be so upright and so on right now. It can be on in 45 minutes or when we're done. It doesn't have to right now. And then the other thing is to give that part, or give yourself permission to rest. I can't give you permission to rest. Mark, you can't give the audience permission to rest. You must give yourself the permission to rest. If I give it to you, when the whim hits me, I will take it back, right? So you have to sign your own permission slip, and it might be useful as we continue down this slow winding path we're going to be on today, to just silently say to yourself, I give myself permission to rest. I give my heart permission to rest. I give my mind, my needs, my worrying, I give that permission to rest, and say it as often as you need to.
So I feel that we struggle with this. I mean, I don't want to speak for anyone else. I know I struggle with this. And you very openly shared your own relationship to rest. I wonder if we could explore briefly why we find it hard to give ourselves that permission. I think I feel sometimes a sense of guilt if I'm not doing things, if I'm not helping, if I'm not contributing, if I'm not making progress in some way. Why is this to do with something innate in us? Is it to do with the society we find ourselves in? What's going on with this relationship with permission?
I believe that we have forgotten what enough feels like and what
Mm,
enough is. And there's this over identification with worth being ascribed to what we can do, perform. It's outsourced, like our worth is outsourced. And it is not an individual flaw, it's a collective. Um, there are institutions and systems and education. There's so much conditioning that tells us you are nobody if you aren't producing, if you are not working, if you are not achieving, right? And so rest is this really powerful practice because it satisfies and satiates the body's need for reprieve and rest. It can settle and calm the mind and emotions, and rest as I teach it through the practices of restorative yoga, yoga nidra, and meditation. Those practices of rest are practices that invite us into the memory of who we are and what we are beyond what we can do. And as people remember that, when we start to rest enough to remember that I'm not my performance, I'm valuable, whether I'm an author, a rest coach, or whatever other list of things that matter, they're meaningful to me, but they are not the essence of my being. When I stop over identifying with what I can do and give myself a fraction of rest, then rest brings me into deeper remembrance of who I am beyond all of the conditioning and constraints.
mm.
And so you aren't the only one who struggles with rest. I made myself a devout student of it because that's how I'm going to practice it, right? And I suggest everyone make themselves a devout student of rest. And then with the guilt that comes, right? I talk to the guilt, right? I'll go, why are you here? What's your message? What do you want with me? Right? I'm going to rest anyway, but I am going to stay curious about, well, why is the guilt here? And what is it? What is it pointing me toward?
I wonder sometimes if that guilt is actually somebody else's voice, not our own voice. It might be the voice of a parental figure or caregiver or a boss or somebody that we're trying to impress. Not actually, as you were saying, potentially the real calmer us inside. I've always made me smile a quote, which I'll probably get wrong, but it was something like, you should meditate for half an hour each day, except on busy days when you should try and do an hour, which always made me laugh because it seems so incongruous. But I guess we need this most when we're least rested in a way.
We do. And I do know that quote and I love it. I'm grateful that you pulled it forward. And I live my life in this way. When I know I have to be absolutely on, and a deep sense of presence, purpose, and power is demanded upon me, I am going to rest more because that requires a certain level of presence, a certain level of energy. Where am I going to get that energy from if I don't activate it through my rest practices, right? And it does feel counterintuitive. I think, the quotes like, meditate 30 minutes a day, except when you're busy or you think you don't have time to meditate for 10 minutes, meditate for an hour then, right? And so this is a way I schedule my personal life and my professional life. I'll look ahead and see the moments that I'm like, that's actually high intensity. Let me amplify my rest. Let me build in more space for pauses because I really want to show up.
Well, in a moment, I'd love to ask you a bit more about that transition you've made in your own life. But what you've just reminded me of, because of the way my mind works, which is quite a list-focused, task-based way of living, I found that the only way I can really rest is to actually put it on my to-do list. So that as well as this meeting and this child commitment, family commitment, school commitment, friendship, social commitment, I put in meditation time, or I put in, a bike ride, or just like go to bed early, whatever it might be. And because it's on my plan for the day rather than being a sort of nice to have that gets forgotten, I sort of I make sure it's on my agenda. But you talked about a very profound sort of crisis in your life to now obviously being someone who lives this so profoundly. What steps did you find helped you make that transition? Because it sounds like quite a big transition in your life.
Oh, right. And it wasn't overnight, right? Because I didn't become the person who would work myself into the hospital overnight. And
Mm.
so I didn't come out of that overnight. And I really love what you said, that you put it on your to-do list, which is where we start, right? I think that's a place to start. But what you want to be mindful of is that you still do it with a sense of presence and soul, not just, I want to check this off my
Yeah.
to-do list today, and to be aware of where you put it on the to-do list. Put it at the top of the list and the bottom of the list, right? I'm going to book in my days with that. But so for me, because I was a public school teacher, very committed to my students and my family's education and growth. So I'm working all these hours to try to make sure I'm giving my students my all. This is pre-hospitalization for exhaustion, rhabdomyolysis, dehydration, and everything else, so my work days were very long. I also was a side yoga teacher, right? So I had a side business at that point, and I was teaching a lot of hot and power yoga. And then I also was doing a lot of high intensity workouts. And that was my life, right? My days were never ending. And so this moment where I got stopped and it was abrupt, there was no kind of smooth, integrated slowing down. It was like, you must stop right now. I'm in the hospital. I'm having this flurry of thoughts and I'm thinking, but I want to work out. Like, I want to work out hard. I was attached to that way of living. I was attached to that way of living. And so essentially my body said, no, you can't live like this anymore. And I sat in the hospital bed and I said, well, I'm going to still try. Y'all, I'm telling y'all, did not come to this easy. And though what I ultimately did is the spaces where I had workouts planned, I said, okay, maybe a work in. And that's when I started to do like yin yoga practices or restorative yoga practices. I still was trying to keep up with this unsustainable schedule. And I slowly started weaving more practices of care into that schedule. And ultimately, I came to a place where Mark, what I want to say is that it's really been a journey to love myself.
Mm.
And it's really been a journey to confront myself in the most tender way. And what I mean by that is, how is it that we can have a to-do list that does not include being with ourselves? I started to get really curious about, why am I avoiding me?
Mm.
And so I want to give you steps on one level, and I absolutely don't want to give you steps. I want to give people the inquiry. I want people to sit here as they're listening and start to come home to their bodies, to inhabit their bodies, because so much of what I was doing when I was doing the most out there is I wasn't even in my body. I was living from my chin up, right? Because if I were in my body, the warning signal wouldn't have had to get so loud for me to hear it and to heed it.
Octavia, I just saw a comment in the chat from Lucy, I think it was, that said, listen to your body when it whispers so it won't have to scream. And I think what you're reminding us is often we're getting these sort of embodied clues in our physical health and our emotional state that we're perhaps missing in some ways. And you're really encouraging us to tune into that, I guess, aren't you?
Yeah, like, so what's the first step? How do we build a rest practice that is nourishing and fulfilling and not ridden with guilt? Is build a relationship with the pause, right? Like, can you stop what you're doing right now and be in the pause without judgment of the pause or judgment of how you're being in it, right? And so I guess my answer would be that I started to build a life raft, because I want to live by being honest with myself and creating a relationship with the pause between the words, noticing the pause between the breath. Mm-hmm.
And I noticed my desire to sort of fill a pause, which I think is partly the spirit I have as a host of an event, but just maybe showing a kind of a discomfort I sometimes feel about just stopping. And I think you're helping remind us the importance of that. But I know that you have an actual interactive practice, which you call, I think it's the pause breath, where you can maybe teach us how we could do a simple practice for a few minutes. Perhaps you could take us through that.
I can do that.
Great.
Yeah. So if you're in a position where you can get 1% more comfortable, please do that. Right. And I do feel like it's important to name that if there's something you feel like you need to do, like close a tab or send a message, something that is kind of like lingering in the back of your mind. And if you could just do that one thing, you feel like you'll have an ounce more presence, then do that one thing. And then come back to us and find a comfortable seat, even if that means you have to move. Even if it means you have to make noise, right? Sometimes we are holding a discomfort. And then my invitation is for you to look up, down, or away from the screen. This could also mean closing your eyes, right? And I like when someone offers me a buffet of options, I will try them all to decide which one I want to reside within for the moment. So if your eyes are open, you just set your gaze on some point that is not moving. If your eyes are closed, set your gaze on one point that is not moving. And if it feels all right, notice your body. And if your inclination, right, you go up to your head to think about noticing your body, it might be helpful to notice your body by just placing a hand someplace on your body. This also helps remind us, like, I am right here. I am here. So notice your body, honor your body, in your own way, thank your body for being here. Can you remember that part of you that you said was most in need of rest? You might silently say to yourself, you can rest now. You've done enough. You've done enough. Now rest. Be aware of where you feel spacious and open, grounded even. Be aware of where you might feel something like tension or holding on or clenching, grasping. Those places need more tenderness, not less. They need more acceptance, not less. So, what are we doing right now? Nothing in one sense. And just because we're doing nothing, as my teacher, Dr. Gail Parker says, does not mean that nothing is happening. There is a happening that can occur when we stop pushing and pulling and straining that just does not have room to unfold when we are in the way. Begin to notice your breath and just pay attention to your breath. Our attention has become so commodified. It's really like prime real estate. Everybody wants some of this currency called our attention. And for this moment, for this practice, for this conversation, this community gathering, the invitation is to spend the currency of your attention on yourself, on your breath, on your life force. Notice your inhalation. Notice your exhalation. These really beautiful movements, right? The inhale and the exhale. But what we often don't pay attention to is that point of transition, that point of pause, that point of stillness that really is what informs the quality of the next movement of breath. We don't notice the space in between the inhale and exhalation. So for the first 3 breaths here, I want you to focus on just the inhalation. And then soften the focus on just the inhalation. And for the next 3 breaths, focus on only the exhalation, meaning lend your greatest attention to the exhalation. And then let that go. Next time, notice an inhalation. Feel the touch of the breath as it graces the inside of the nostrils. Notice the pause after the inhalation. And then notice the exhalation. So this is the practice to inhale with ease and notice the pause. And then exhale and notice the pause. So we aren't lengthening the pause. We're not exaggerating it. We're not doing anything to the breath, but noticing it. We're noticing the movement. So there's the in-breath. Then we notice the pause. Notice the movement of the exhalation. Then we notice the pause. Do that 3 times. Inhale, notice the pause. Exhale, notice the pause. Do that 3 times. And then for the last 3 breaths here, Be with the pause more than the movement. And what I mean by that is you'll inhale, you notice it, you feel it, but then settle into the pause, savor the pause, be with it, pay attention to it, then exhale. So your mind may get pulled to the movement more because we have more practice with that. But the invitation here is to be with the pause, to notice the pause, to get more cozy, if you will, with the pause. Do that one more time. Inhale, notice the pause. Exhale, notice the pause. And then you notice your body. You notice that place within you that you said was most in need of rest. Keep holding that softly. And when you're ready, you come back. If your eyes are closed, you open them.
Wow. My heart, which was my area that needed rest, feels more rested from that. I loved two particular things about the exercise there, Octavia. One is realizing that it's not really a breathing exercise so much as an awareness exercise. It's like the noticing is the important bit almost. But the thing I particularly love, and I'm seeing this with all the love for you in the chat now, is just knowing that whatever that was, 850 of us did that together in different parts of the world at the same time. That gives me that sense of like global rest. I really love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's powerful too, right? Thank you for bringing that forward, that it is an awareness exercise, right? It's an embodiment exercise, right? Because rest can feel and seem very inaccessible. But I would also say what we just did, the pause breath, noticing the pause, that can be a rest practice. If that's where you need to start, that's where you start. If you're like, I can't lay down, I can't do a full-on restorative practice or full-on yoga nidra practice or take a nap in the middle of the day, you can sit and practice pause breath. You could do this for the rest of the practice, for the rest of our time here together.
And it helps us, I feel, physiologically as well as emotionally. I can sort of sense that my pulse rate has just dropped a notch, and everything in my physical body feels a bit more in tune with itself. In a moment, Octavia, I'd love to come to some of the questions that I know the community are going to have for you. So if you have a question, folks, please do use the Q&A function, and also you can upvote any questions you see that you'd love to have answered. But I'd like to just lead into that with a question about the relation between our rest and the other people in our lives. I think we all know instinctively that there's this idea that self-care isn't selfish, actually, that we can only really be there for our loved ones when we rest for ourselves. So I hope for many of us that's really, we realize that in doing this, it's an act of love to ourselves and to others. But I think many of us would love to create this sense of rest for those in our lives. Mm-hmm. We may have loved ones who are struggling, children with anxiety, colleagues who are under pressure, people who are bereaved, just people we care about. How can we bring more rest into our relationships and the people around us?
That's a beautiful question. And whenever I hear the word self, I'm going to answer your question. And whenever I hear the word self, I think of this beautiful quote by Maya Angelou. She said, I come as one, I stand as 10,000. And my understanding of when I think about self-care, and when I talk about self-care, I am talking about the 10,000 within me, or the 10,000 that might descend from me, or the 10,000 that my life might touch. And so in that way, when I say self, it's collective. It is the collective. I'm a microcosm. So tending to the microcosm of me is one way to really tend to the collective. And so if I want to be able to pour the nectar or elixir of rest out into the cups of those I love. I have to have something in the cup, or I really would prefer to have an overflow. And so practically what that looks like is my practice really is the first thing on my list. And I'm a mother, and it's one of the most beloved um, roles, identities, gifts, identities I get to embody is being a parent. And I don't start my day attending to my partner or my child's needs. I start my day attending to my heart and to my body and aligning with my breath. Sometimes that's 3 minutes and I'll take it. Sometimes that's 30 minutes and I'll take that too. Right. And so having the nectar to pour means that I'm sourcing the nectar within. Other ways that I infuse rest into my family life and my work life is at the end of each night, my family and I, we do a 2-minute meditation practice. This includes my 6-year-old, right? We set a timer. He likes to hold these little rocks he found on a hike. And we sit, and sometimes he focuses on his belly moving in and out. We just sit in the quiet together, right? And this is my way of teaching him right now that there aren't just two modes of operation, busy, 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 or asleep. there's so much in between that. Other things that I do is I will lay down in bed with my son and do a guided relaxation. And you might think, well, you teach this for a living, but it really is wiggle your toes, now relax them. Roll your ankle, now relax them. Right. So in my family life, this is what I do. Like, I don't just I'm not stingy with these are my practices. I keep them to myself. I give them, I share them with my family.
That's beautiful.
And then one way that, a lot of my rest-based work is with people at work. Like, I was on with a corporation before I got on here with you. And the lesson I was teaching them is how to access more ease, and then how to share that ease with people. And, the way I manage my email is an extension of grace and rest to other people. I don't impose a sense of urgency on people for things that really aren't life and death. I have a clear awareness. I'm like, I know what is urgent. And most of the time an email is not, right? It depends on what's in the email, right? But what I'm saying is, I don't impose urgency on other people. I think that gives people I love and care about more space, and work with more space for ease, more space to consider rest, right?
That's really lovely, actually, because that means the way we behave as parents, colleagues, friends, neighbors, we have a choice over whether we're behaving in ways that might create more ease or less ease for the people around
Right,
us, and perhaps
right.
in way more ways than we realize. I really want to come on to some of these lovely questions. So Claire has said, being neurodiverse, I find it very hard to quieten my mind. I suspect lots of us share that sense of busy mind. Claire, thank you. What tips would you suggest, she asks?
This is a great question. The mind doesn't need to be quiet. You get to direct your attention and awareness, right? But what I hear in that question is, maybe you are having so many thoughts all the time. And what we just did in the practice today was give the mind an anchor point. First, the anchor point was the body. We're noticing the body. Then the anchor point was one part of the breath. We're noticing the breath. Then the anchor point was the pause. We're noticing the pause. And so a practice that you get to employ over and over, maybe 100 times a day, is, where's my attention? Like, for the person who asked that question right now, guide your awareness to one thing and let it be one thing at a time. And then it moves on. Then focus on that one thing at a time. And then it moves on. And then sometimes that movement of the mind might require some movement in the body, right? Like, you need to go for a walk. You need to actually move your body, do something with your body that is movement oriented.
Thank you, Octavia. There's a lot of people interested in whether you offer things like recorded meditation. So Tonicha has said you have such a calming voice. Do you offer recorded meditation sessions? So I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you could share what resources might be available.
I actually have a SoundCloud that has meditations and yoga nidra practices that people can download.
So
And
could
then
we share that in our follow-up tomorrow? Would that be okay?
you can. And if you join my mailing list, I send meditations and rest practices once a month.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Super, thank you. Madhu said, how can we recover from burnout while dealing with, oh, sorry, I've lost the question, sorry, while dealing with non-stop stresses of life, not being able to take enough breaks? So sometimes, obviously, the lack of rest, I guess, is something we have control over because we could give ourselves more permission. But of course, some people are in situations, young children, stressful work that they have commitments to. We may not always be able to fit as much rest in alongside the very real demands of life.
That's right. That's right. And we have to be really creative. I think rest is a practice of subversion, right? Like nothing in our constructed ecosystem is built to support our rest. So we have to be really ingenious with finding ways for it. But what I want to be clear about is that I'm not talking about, I wanted to teach that pause breath because it's a way to take refuge. It is a way to regulate the nervous system. It is a way to take respite in the middle of your day, in the middle of a meeting, in the middle of activity, right? So if we're burnt out and we're stressed out and it feels like there's no end in sight, then we have to get that much more creative about how do the word that came is steal moments of rest. Like by any means, what am I going to do? And I also need to be clear that I don't believe that rest is a luxury or a privilege. It's a necessity. And I also am not one who it was easy on a financial, economical, or fiscal level, easy for me to just rest, right? I'm like, if I can find a way to rest in that moment that I had this breakdown and had to revive my way back forward, we all can. So I want to ask that person the question, what are you going to do? It feels like to me, the energy of the question feels like there's a wall and there's a Mack truck coming and you're in the middle and you know something has to change. What are you going to do? What can you do? What's accessible for you to do right now in your own being, in your own
Octavia,
time?
why don't we ask the whole community that lovely question?
Yeah.
What's one thing that you could do, each of you, again, share it if you'd like to help build more rest or give yourself more permission to rest in response to all these amazing things we've heard today. So feel free to share in the, so I'm saying pause for a cup of tea, learn from our animals, turn off the technology, connect with nature, meditate, more walking, less time on my phone, more time for myself, listen to a song, power naps, breaks from work. Lovely. These are great life tips. Thank you, everyone. And there's many more coming. Sing, schedule me time, go to bed earlier, pause and breathe, be outside, give myself permission, learn from cats. I love that. Learn from cats. Thank you, folks, for sharing those.
Right. And what this demonstrates, and this is essential to my teaching, is your answers are inside you. I'm an expert I teach rest, I guide rest, and ultimately what I'm holding people in is this journey back to self so you can source the answers for yourself and apply them to the life you live. This is really important to me. And this is incredible that within this community, I could have given you 3 tips, but this community just gave you 100. That's really powerful, Mark.
Really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I love this question from Lindsay, which sort of links back to what you said earlier on about, that we're sort of under pressure from ourselves and from society to be busy. She asked, how can I gently remind people that I have value, even when I'm not a, in quotes, productive member of society, when I take the time to rest and focus within?
Mm-hmm. I love that question. Thank you for that question. You have to really be an embodiment of that yourself. We're not trying to convince anyone of anything, right? Like when you really know that I am valuable sitting here drinking my tea and enjoying it, then you know that. You don't have to convince anyone. But in terms of clearly communicating those boundaries, I think it's so helpful, like when I go off for, say, a personal sabbatical or a holiday, and I leave my out of office message up, sometimes I also add, and you also can't reach out to my assistant because she's with her family as well, right? And I'm like, I understand that can create frustration for someone else, but I'm also communicating, it's December 25th. Maybe you shouldn't be emailing me either, right? And so I think and it's lighthearted. It's very lighthearted, right? So my answer to that question is, be really bold in your own sense of worthiness that is beyond what you can do. When you start to wear that well and embody it well, it just is there, right? So you have to deal with that on the inside. And then identify what you say, what your boundary is, and you communicate that with love and compassion and grace as many times and as often as you have to. And then the other thing that's helpful is invite those who might judge the rest into it if it feels safe and it doesn't feel like they're going to sabotage it, right? Like I have some busybody people in my life that I'll go, hey, you want to go for a slow walk today? Do you want to sit and have a cup of tea with me, and let's put our phones over here? But it's not with judgment. It's just like, I want to be with you. Because really the rest practices are like, I get to slow down and be with myself. And Mark, if I'm with you, I just want to be with you. So invite people to be with you in a restful way.
Yeah, I really love that. And you're reminding me that when we do show others that we've built rest into our lives, it kind of gives them permission to do their own version of that as well, and to say, oh, well, here's someone that I care about that does this. Maybe
It,
I'll start a
it
daily
really,
meditation practice.
it
Yeah.
really, it really does. And it really does, right? And I also just want to encourage people. Like, I love that someone said a cup of tea, being with my pet. Like, there's so many ways that we can find reprieve, slow down, and access presence. And really, that's what I'm talking about, right? My practices are yoga nidra, restorative yoga, meditation. And if you want to do those things, come go with me.
Well,
And
you mentioned another practice you love, Octavia, which I'd love to take you up on, because you've written this beautiful book and you told me how much you love reading from your book. So maybe we could wrap up the questions and hear a little bit from your book. Or is there something you'd like to share?
yes. So what I like to do is pause again. I am the queen of pauses. And then have us take a breath in together. And and so I wrote this book, Pause, Rest, Feed. And one way I invite people to use the book is to take a moment, breathe, and just ask what message will be useful for me today, and then open the book to a page and trust that that is the message. And so I just did that for the group. I said, what's a good message to share with the group? Open to page 72 and 73. They're quite short, so I'll read them both. Just listen. All you have to do is listen. Even if the world, as you knew it, was not the world you wanted it to be, you are allowed to mourn the death of it. You may have yearned for this divorce from that reality and still weep now as you stand at the grave of your marriage. Perhaps the life you were living wasn't the life you are worthy of and desired. You are allowed to grieve it as it disappears and becomes invisible. This is a threshold. If you don't walk through the valley, you do not cultivate the capacity to make it to the peak. As you learn to be with your grief, you expand your capacity to be in your joy. If you cannot face your grief, you limit your access to joy. Grief and joy are sacred twins. Grief and joy are sacred twins, and so that's the page I opened to. That's the page I read to this community. And I really trust that something about those words resonated with someone. But what I also know is that when we start to slow down, when we start to rest, when we start to make space for moments of stillness, we can feel ourselves again. And some of what we feel might be grief, and some of what we feel might be joy. And that all of that is welcome when we welcome all of ourself, our whole self, back into the fold of our own humanity and beingness. So I hope those words resonated in some way. When I said, oh, those are the pages I landed on, I thought I should change it. I should read something else.
I saw you look down and say, oh, and then and it was beautiful, and it sent a shiver down my spine, and I can see a lot of, a powerful connection in the chat as well, Octavia.
I said I gotta trust it.
Yeah,
And I was
great.
like, well, this isn't happy, is it?
No, but I think that it reminds me of something Brené Brown says about you can't selectively numb your emotions. And if we try and numb our anxieties and our sadness, we also numb our capacity for positive emotions and gratitude and joy and love. And so actually that twins of anxiety and joy is such a powerful reminder, I think.
It is. It is. Mm-hmm.
We're drawing towards the end of our time. I'm so grateful to everyone in this community for being part of this and for you sharing so much wisdom. What we're going to do tomorrow is send a follow-up with a link to the video and the chat, because there's been so much wisdom in the chat, and also to some of your fantastic resources. And we'll try and include that SoundCloud that you mentioned in as well. But I wonder, before we part today, it's been such a special time together, Octavia, maybe you'd like to take us through one sort of final practice of pausing, resting, restoring ourselves before we say goodbye.
I would love to do that. Once again, your eyes can be open, they can be closed, whatever you choose. Let them be soft. Let it be soft. I have to honor what I hear. And what I heard is tell them that they are worthy of rest. Tell them they don't have to earn it. Tell them they are enough and they have done enough. And so on your inhale, quietly say to yourself, I am. And on your exhale, worthy of rest. And we'll just sit with that for 3 to 5 breaths. And what I hope you feel in the sitting with that is the worthiness of your humanity, the light of your life, the power of your presence, how worthy you are just because you are. Take another breath this way. Inhale, I am. Exhale, worthy of rest. And let that carry you forward. Let it work its way through your system. Let it even agitate you, right? Like your mind might go, what do you mean I don't have to earn rest? That is definitely not what we learn. Yet, it's true. Everything we learn is not true, yet this is true. You are worthy as you are. Please take in a deep breath in through your nose. Exhale everything out. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Mark, for having me. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your shares. Thank you for your vulnerability, right? Thank you for your truth. Find a way or make a way to rest, right? Because you can. There's a lot of wisdom here. Thank you all so much.
Octavia, on behalf of all of us, really heartfelt thanks for your time and your wisdom and your encouragement, and just for helping us actually experience a sense of rest and recovery together. And I feel like it's been a real sense of togetherness from the community, but also some really practical, not just, I think, skills, but like it's a change in attitude that you're helping us take here, which is so important and has these ripple effects that go out around us and around the world. So we're all so grateful for you for sharing this, and keep up the fantastic work.
Thank you. I will keep up the fantastic rest.
Much better. Bye-bye, everyone. See you again.
Bye. Thank you all.